The twin moons hung low over the desert planet, casting silver light across rolling dunes. Kale adjusted the strap of his satchel and paused at the crest of a ridge, staring at the distant glow of a small encampment. He had been wandering this barren world for weeks, drawn by tales of the Thalir, an ancient alien race said to dwell in harmony with elemental forces that the humans barely understood. Most humans avoided them, fearful of their powers and old traditions. But Kale's curiosity had always outweighed caution. The wind was dry and sharp, carrying whispers that seemed almost alive. It rattled the metal of his gear and tugged at the edges of the map he had been carrying, maps that were half scrawled with constellations and half with his own guesses. He hesitated, sensing the weight of the desert around him, something old, almost conscious, watching his approach. Kale descended carefully, every step deliberate as if the sand itself might judge him. The encampment lay nestled in a crescent of dunes, tents stitched from shimmering fabrics that caught the light of the moons. Small fires burned in hollowed pits, flickering shadows that danced like silent spirits. He slowed, not wanting to startle anyone. But then he saw her. She moved among the tents with the grace of a creature born of the wind itself. Her hair flowed like liquid midnight, catching the moonlight and scattering it in tiny silver sparks. She was tending to a small flame in a hollow stone bowl, her fingers delicate yet certain as she coaxed the fire to grow. She hummed softly, a melody that resonated with the desert itself, and Kale felt an unfamiliar tightness in his chest. He knew he should stay hidden. Any human approaching a Thalir uninvited risked immediate distrust, perhaps even exile. Yet some force, quiet but insistent, pushed him forward. Kale stepped lightly into the glow of the fire, clearing his throat softly. The Thalir woman froze. Her eyes, a deep, almost liquid shade of violet, widened in surprise. Kale's stomach knotted. This was the moment that could change everything or ruin it completely. I mean no harm, Kale said, his voice breaking slightly. I am just a traveler. I am Lyra, she said finally, her voice melodic yet firm. You should not be here human. There was a long silence, broken only by the whisper of the wind over the dunes and the faint crackle of fire. Kale, unsure of what else to do, did something he did not think through fully. He reached out almost instinctively and brushed a strand of her hair away from her face. Her eyes snapped open wide, a mixture of surprise and shock crossing her features. Kale froze, heart hammering. He had intended it as a gentle gesture, a mark of respect in his own human way. Yet he saw in her eyes the weight of something older, a warning, a secret, and perhaps curiosity. You dare, she began, but her voice faltered. Her lips curved slightly, almost imperceptibly, and Kale caught the faintest hint of a smile. I didn't mean to offend, Kale said quickly. It was instinct. I want to learn. I understand. The warmth of the fire spread across his face, but it was her presence, quiet and commanding, that made his pulse quicken. They spoke then, cautiously, in small exchanges. Kale asked questions about the stars, about the fire she tended, about the rituals and songs of the Thalir. Lyra answered in measured phrases, each word chosen carefully. She told him of the desert wines that carried messages, of the twin moons that guided their migrations, of a culture bound to nature and spirit. Kale listened, fascinated. Each answer she gave seemed to pull him deeper into a world he had never imagined, a world so alive and yet so distant from his human experience. He realized slowly that understanding her people was not about books or records, it was about presence, observation, and respect. The night deepened. The twin moons rose higher, bathing the desert in pale light. Kale could feel the weight of unspoken words between them, the curiosity, the caution, the unacknowledged desire to connect. Suddenly, Lyra's expression shifted. Her eyes widened as if she sensed something. The wind picked up, carrying a strange hum across the dunes, almost like a heartbeat. Kale felt it too, a vibration under his feet, subtle but unmistakable. The desert, it watches, Lyra whispered. Her gaze met his, urgent now. It knows you are here, and it will not let this night pass quietly. Shadows stretched unnaturally in the firelight, and the dunes seemed to ripple as if alive. Something ancient stirred beneath the sand, sensing his presence, sensing Lyra's. What is it? He asked, voice low. Lyra shook her head, her hand tightening around a small talisman at her neck. Not yet, but soon you must be ready. All he knew was that he wanted to remain, to see her again, to learn from her. But instinctively, he felt that whatever was coming would change everything. Lyra returned to her fire, tending it with precise movements, but her eyes did not leave him. There was a tension in her posture, a readiness for something unseen. Kale studied her, captivated not just by her beauty, but by the strength and mystery that surrounded her. Hours passed. The desert whispered, the twin moons traced their paths, and the two of them remained by the fire, human and Thalia, so different yet drawn together by curiosity and courage. Kale realized that the simple act of reaching out, of touching her hair, had been more than a gesture. It had awakened something not just in her, but perhaps in the desert itself. Finally, as dawn threatened to break the horizon with pale light, Kale stood. "I should return to my camp," he said, reluctant. "I will not disturb you further. But know this, the night does not forget, and neither do I." The desert seemed to respond, the sands shifting in quiet patterns that only she could read. Something had awakened, stirred by courage, curiosity, and a single daring human touch. The desert sun rose slowly, painting the dunes in shades of gold and crimson. Kale returned to his small, canvas tent at the edge of the encampment. His body was weary from wandering, but his mind refused rest. He replayed the night over and over, the way Lyra had looked, her voice, the strange hum of the desert as if it were alive and aware of him. He unpacked his maps and instruments, but his hands trembled slightly, betraying the excitement he tried to hide. Nothing on this planet felt ordinary. Even the air seemed thicker with possibility, charged with unspoken words and unseen forces. Kale had come seeking understanding, yet he had found something more, a connection that defied explanation, even between worlds. Night fell again, swifter than he expected. The twin moons climbed into the sky, silver and blue light spreading across the dunes. Kale sat outside his tent, staring at the stars, tracing constellations that looked unfamiliar. Then, without warning, he heard the soft rustle of footsteps in the sand. Lyra appeared, silent and careful as a shadow. Her eyes glimmered in the moonlight. Kale rose instinctively, unsure whether to greet her or retreat. "You should not wander alone," she said softly, her gaze sharp but not unkind. "I'm not wandering," Kale replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "I wait. Yet you return, and you linger." It was small but organized, with charts and drawings pinned against the canvas. Kale gestured for her to sit, but Lyra only observed quietly, her hands folded neatly before her. "You touch me," she said suddenly, her tone calm but edged with warning. "The first night when you reached for my hair, that was unusual. It is not a gesture we take lightly." "I did not know, I only—" He paused, searching for the right words. "I felt respect, admiration. I wanted to honor you." "Visions. Can we talk?" Lyra answered with stories rich in imagery and meaning, of winds that carried messages from ancient ancestors, of spirits that walked the dunes at night, of rituals that honored both life and the unseen world. Kale listened intently, fascinated. Every word drew him deeper into her world, a world so unlike his own. He realized that the Thalia did not simply live on this planet. They were part of it, as inseparable from the desert as the sands themselves. As the night deepened, the conversation became more personal. Kale spoke of his journey, of the loneliness of being human in a universe that often seemed too vast to understand. Lyra listened, silent at first, then shared fragments of her own story, a life bound by rules and expectations, by ancient duties she had not chosen, by a curse that tied her powers to her emotions. Kale's heart ached with empathy. "It must be heavy," he said softly. "It is," Lyra admitted, her gaze distant. "To feel so deeply, and to know that those feelings can hurt both myself and others, it is a burden I carry alone. Until now." The stars above seemed to pulse gently, as if aware of the fragile bond forming between them. Then faintly, Kale noticed a tremor beneath his feet. He looked up, alarmed, but Lyra's expression remained calm, though tense. "The desert stirs," she said quietly. "Something ancient has awakened. It is drawn to you, human, and to me." "Why me?" "Tests of courage, understanding, and heart. The spirits judge not by power, but by intent, and tonight they will see yours. But know this, the desert is patient, and it will not forgive mistakes. You must hold to your courage, your respect, and your care for others. Only then can you survive what is coming." Every gesture seemed to hum with meaning, and Kale realized that even in his own world, nothing had ever prepared him for this, a universe alive with both beauty and peril. Finally, Lyra turned to him. "Come," she said, voice gentle but firm. "If you are to face what is waking, you must see it with your own eyes." The sand shimmered under the twin moons, as though reflecting a secret light from beneath. The desert seemed to shift, forming patterns that only Lyra could read. Kale felt the pulse of life in the ground, the subtle vibrations of spirits moving beneath the surface. Then, from the distant shadows, a faint shape emerged, a spectral figure, drifting just above the sands. Its form was vague, ever-shifting, like smoke or mist, but Cale could feel its gaze fix on him. A shiver ran through his body. Lyra placed a hand on his shoulder, grounding him. "Do not fear. Observe, listen, and respond with understanding. Strength alone will not protect you." It circled them, silent but imposing, its presence commanding respect. Cale's instincts screamed to flee, but he remembered Lyra's words: courage, understanding, heart. He breathed deeply, focusing not on fear, but on presence, on respect for this being and for Lyra who had guided him here. The spirit hovered near, then extended a shimmering tendril of light toward him, as if testing his intent. Cale stood tall, unflinching, and met its gaze with quiet sincerity. The air thrummed with tension, the desert wind carrying a low hum that seemed to vibrate in his chest. After a long, suspended moment, the spirit drew back. Its form wavered, then dissipated into the night air, leaving a faint trail of glowing sand. Lyra exhaled softly, her hand still resting on his shoulder. "You have passed the first watch," she said quietly, relief in her tone. "But this is only the beginning. The desert has many eyes, and it remembers all who pass through." He realized that his journey with Lyra was more than curiosity or admiration. It was a test of his heart, his courage, and his willingness to see beyond the ordinary. As they returned to the tent, the desert settled around them, calm but watchful. Cale felt a deep, unspoken connection forming with Lyra, fragile, delicate, yet undeniable. He also knew that the night had changed everything. Lyra paused at the entrance to his tent, her violet eyes meeting his. "Rest now, human. Tomorrow brings more trials, and you will need your mind and spirit clear. But remember, the desert watches, and it speaks to those who are willing to listen." "We shall see, human, we shall see." And as Cale drifted into sleep, he dreamt of deserts that whispered secrets, of violet eyes that seemed to glow with the power of stars, and of a night that would never truly end. The morning light spilled across the desert in pale amber, casting long shadows over the dunes. Cale awoke with a start, the memory of last night still vivid, Lyra's violet eyes, the whispering winds, the guardian spirit that had tested his heart. He rose carefully, aware that today would bring new challenges and perhaps deeper revelations about the bond forming between them. Outside his tent, the desert was alive with movement. Sand shifted with a rhythm that felt almost like a heartbeat. Lyra stood at a distance, observing him with the same careful gaze she had used all night. Her hair caught the sunlight, glinting like woven shadows, and Cale felt his chest tighten. "You are ready," she said without preamble. "Today we journey to the ruins. There you will see the power that binds my people, the spirits that guard our history, and you will be tested again." The journey was quiet at first, punctuated by the occasional whisper of desert creatures and the distant call of unseen birds. Yet beneath the calm, a tension hummed. The ruins ahead were not merely structures of stone and sand. They were alive with memory, with ancient power. Finally, they arrived. The ruins rose from the dunes like a memory half forgotten. Stone pillars carved with strange, glowing symbols jutted from the sand. Bioluminescent plants clung to the cracks, bathing the place in a soft, otherworldly light. The air vibrated with energy, and Cale could feel it tugging at his heart, at his thoughts. "Stay close," Lyra said softly. "The spirits within these ruins respond to both presence and intent. You must remain mindful of your actions, your emotions, even your breathing." He marveled at the carvings, stories of Thalir ancestors, of battles fought with courage and wisdom, of sacrifices made to protect both people and planet. As they walked deeper, Lyra's hand brushed his arm lightly, a silent gesture of caution. Cale felt the warmth linger, not just physically, but emotionally. He realized how much he relied on her presence, not for guidance alone, but for courage, for grounding in a world so unlike his own. Then a soft hum began, resonating from the walls themselves. It grew louder, vibrating through Cale's chest. Shadows gathered at the edges of the light, coalescing into shapes that were not fully solid, not fully spirit, but something in between. Guardian spirits, he realized, moving to assess the intruders. Lyra stopped. "Focus," she whispered. "Do not react with fear. They judge the heart, not the body." One approached, circling him slowly, tendrils of light reaching toward his heart. Cale stood still, not out of fear, but with quiet determination. He remembered Lyra's words, her teachings of respect and empathy. "I mean no harm," he said softly, speaking more to himself than to the spirit. "I seek only to understand." Cale exhaled, relief mingling with awe. Lyra's hand rested briefly on his shoulder. Good, she said, voice calm. But this is only the first test. The spirits here guard not only our past, but our future. You must walk carefully. Lyra explained that the ruins were alive with memory, with emotion. Each visitor left a trace, and each spirit could feel the energy of those who entered. As they entered a wide chamber, Lyra stopped suddenly. The air grew heavy, charged with an energy that made Kale's skin prickle. At the center of the room floated a larger spirit, more solid, more commanding than the others. Its gaze locked onto Kale. "It has chosen you," Lyra said quietly, almost a warning. "Not me, you. If it judges you unworthy, it could bind you to the ruins, perhaps forever." Kale felt a strange pull, as if the being were probing his very essence. Memories flashed in his mind, his childhood, moments of kindness, moments of fear, moments when he had acted from hope rather than self-interest. The spirit seemed to weigh them all, drawing a map of his soul with every pulse. Kale remembered Lyra's earlier words about courage and heart. He focused on them. He thought of her the way she had trusted him enough to guide him here, to share pieces of herself with a stranger. He thought of the desert, alive with spirits watching him, judging not his strength but his intent. Then, with a sudden shift, the spirit's light intensified, almost blinding. Kale braced himself, standing still, letting his emotions flow without fear or restraint. In that moment, he felt something change, a connection, subtle but undeniable, between himself, the spirit, and Lyra. The spirit recoiled slightly, then dissipated into the air, leaving a trail of sparkling dust. Kale exhaled, trembling but triumphant. Lyra stepped closer, her violet eyes wide with relief and admiration. "You passed," she said softly, "but more tests await. The desert is patient, and it does not forgive arrogance. You have shown courage, but true understanding requires more than a single act. Trust is fragile, and the desert watches those who form bonds too quickly. But I sense your heart is true." He realized that his presence here was part of a larger story, one that had been written long before he arrived, yet was unfinished. Hours passed as they explored the ruins. Kale learned from Lyra not just with words, but through observation, how she moved, how she breathed, how she commanded the respect of spirits without fear or force. He began to understand the subtle power of presence, of intent, of honesty. At one point, they entered a chamber filled with a soft blue glow. Bioluminescent vines clung to the walls, and the air smelled faintly of jasmine. Lyra paused, placing her hand on a carved stone. "This is where the elders once taught," she said quietly, "where they passed down wisdom of balance, of trust, of restraint. The spirits here remember every choice ever made. That is what truly matters." As the sun began to set, the desert outside the ruins glowed with the soft light of the twin moons rising. Shadows lengthened, and the air carried a new tension. The spirits were restless, the desert alive with expectation. Lyra turned to Kale, her violet eyes serious. "Tonight, you will be tested again. The spirits of the dunes have been awakened by your presence, by your courage, and by your bond with me. You must be ready. Prepare yourself, human. The desert will speak, and it will demand your honesty, your courage, and your heart." Kale knew that the night ahead would test everything he had learned, every ounce of courage he possessed, and perhaps even the bond that was forming between him and Lyra. And somewhere beneath the sands, the guardian spirits watched, their silver eyes glimmering, aware that the human who dared to touch a Thalier's hair was walking a path few outsiders had ever walked, a path of understanding, of trust, and of a bond that might transcend worlds. The twin moons hung high over the desert, casting their silver and blue light across the dunes. Kale and Lyra stood at the edge of a towering sand dune, the wind carrying whispers of spirits awakened by their journey. The ruins behind them had tested them both, revealing courage, empathy, and trust, but tonight promised the final trial, one that would challenge everything they thought they knew about themselves and each other. Kale's heart pounded, a mixture of anticipation and fear. The air hummed with energy, as if the desert itself was alive and watching. Lyra's hand brushed his arm, steadying him, grounding him in the moment. Her violet eyes met his, deep and unreadable. "You are ready," she said softly. "But understand this, the spirits you face tonight do not judge lightly. They see your heart, your fears, and your intent. Only through truth can you survive." At the center hovered a massive guardian spirit, more solid and imposing than any Kale had seen before. Its form shimmered with silver and blue light, its eyes like molten stars, observing them intently. Kale inhaled deeply, recalling Lyra's teachings, courage, respect, heart. He focused not on fear, but on his intent. "I seek understanding, not power," he whispered. "I wish only to learn, and to protect those I care for. Remember, human, it is not enough to be brave. You must be honest with yourself and with me." The spirit's tendrils of light reached toward him again. This time, Kale did not flinch. He let his thoughts flow freely, images of the desert, of Lyra, of every moment that had led him here, washing over him like a river. He did not hide his fear, his hope, or his longing. He embraced it all, offering it honestly to the spirit. Lyra watched closely, her own energy pulsing as the desert responded to both of them. She whispered ancient words, guiding the flow of power without dominating it. Kale felt a subtle warmth emanate from her, a bond that gave him strength and clarity. Then, a shift. The spirit's form wavered, the light intensifying until the entire clearing glowed. Kale felt a connection, not just to the spirit, but to the desert, to Lyra, and to a greater understanding of life itself. It was as if all the lessons of the journey, the fears faced, and the trust built were crystallizing into something pure and undeniable. Lyra stepped closer, her violet eyes gleaming. "You are ready," she said softly. "Together we can guide the spirit, calm it, and balance its power." His legs trembled, not from exhaustion, but from the intensity of the experience. Lyra released his hand and stepped back, a quiet pride in her expression. "You have passed," she said softly, "not by strength, but by heart. That is what the spirits value most." "I could not have done it without you." The desert had settled, calm once more, but its presence was still strong, a living memory of trials faced and lessons learned. "You have changed," Lyra said quietly, her voice carrying both awe and warmth. "Humans rarely understand the depth of what we are, yet you see more than most. And courage, maybe more than I realized." Then as the moons traced their path across the sky, Lyra turned to him, her expression serious once more. "There is one final choice, Kale. You have proven your heart and your courage. But to remain here, to walk this path fully, you must decide, will you stay when the moons fade, when the desert calls us back to solitude? Or will you return to your world?" He had crossed deserts, faced spirits, learned the ways of an alien world, and opened himself to someone who had once seemed untouchable. He realized that leaving now would mean turning his back on the connection they had forged, on the trust and understanding that had grown between them. I will stay," he said finally, his voice steady. "I will not leave, not you, not this world. I've learned too much, and I care too deeply." The trials of the ruins and the desert had forged a connection that transcended worlds, a bridge between human and Thalia, courage and trust, heart and spirit. As they watched the twin moons descend toward the horizon, the stars above seemed to shine brighter, as if acknowledging their choice, their connection, and the harmony they had achieved. The desert hummed softly, a lullaby of ancient wisdom and endless possibility. Kale realized in that moment that the journey had changed him forever. He had faced fear, embraced vulnerability, and learned that courage was not the absence of doubt, but the willingness to act despite it. Lyra had shown him that trust and understanding were as powerful as any force in the universe. And now, together, they would face whatever came next, not as guide and traveler, not as human and Thalia, but as two souls united by respect, courage, and the quiet, unspoken bond of hearts that had dared to trust. The desert stretched endlessly before them, alive with whispers and light. The twin moons reflected on the sand, marking the end of one trial and the beginning of another. Kale and Lyra stood hand in hand, ready to step forward into a future neither could predict, but both were determined to face together. Somewhere in the shifting dunes, the spirits rested, watching, knowing that the human who had touched Athalia's hair had not only survived but had awakened something extraordinary. A bond that would endure, a courage that would inspire, and a love that would bridge worlds. The night deepened, the stars shimmered, and for the first time Kale felt at home, not just on this desert planet, but in a world full of mysteries, challenges, and the quiet, profound connection he had found in Lyra. And the desert whispered not in warning now, but in approval as the two of them watched the moons and stars, hearts aligned, ready to face the dawn together.